Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for today's meetup. On today's agenda, Chris will be providing an overview of the new application, Adopta. As a reminder, we'll be recording and posting this video on meetups.com shortly after the presentation. And during the meetup, if you'd like to make comments or chat with other participants, then feel free to use the chat window. However, if you'd like to submit a question for the team to answer, then feel free to submit your questions through the Q&A window. With that said, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Chris.
Thanks, Heather. What I'm going to do is actually pass it over to Scott. Scott's going to start off our presentation this morning or this afternoon for some, and then we'll transfer it over to me, and I'll do some demos and talk a little bit about the technical implementation details. But Scott's going to start off with an overview, and then we'll just jump into demo, and if anybody has any questions throughout, just make sure, like Heather said, put them in the chat window, and then we'll also have some sections during the presentation for questions. Go ahead, Scott.
All right, thanks, Chris. So thanks, everyone. Chris and I wanted to give you an overview today of a new solution we shipped in our September ArcGIS for Local Government release called Adopta. And Adopta really kind of fits into a larger strategy that we've been working on for constituent engagement and providing a set of solutions that help communities share information with constituents, authoritative information with constituents like alerts and projects, begin to have two-way communication with structured feedback like Citizen Problem Reporter and other solutions we have like that, and then ultimately transform into a larger kind of constituent relationship management approach that allows you to have directed solutions that really engage in a dialogue with the community. And so kind of transition from passive sharing of information to actually active engagement with the community and stakeholders in the community that you represent. So as I mentioned, we shipped this new solution offering in September called Adopta, and what it is an ArcGIS Web Application Builder Developer Edition configuration that allows you to engage the public in the operations and maintenance of natural and man-made assets. And it allows you to do that by increasing community involvement with a two-way communication with citizens. And Adopta can be configured for many different types of assets, and we're going to show you, Chris is going to show you some examples of that today. Wow, my PowerPoint slide decks are causing me trouble again. Let me just blow this up. I apologize about that. So this, several key objectives we wanted to meet with Adopta. The first is to provide a real simple adopt an asset application that engages community members, right? Really try to enlist people to participate in that program. And we really wanted to lower the bar for participation, right? Many individuals in the community don't have social media accounts, and what we landed on kind of as a minimum level of a kind of identification is an email address. Ultimately, we wanted one of the key aspects of Adopta was really to provide correspondence and updates through email. So not a complex or web mapping application necessarily as the only mechanism for you to report status on assets, but really a simple email client, and we'll show you that today. The interesting thing about the Adopta application is that you can use it in your community's what I call normal operations or day-to-day kind of maintenance and activities, or in response to incidents and events, and we'll talk about some of those use cases as well. And finally, as you're accumulating this information, and this feedback you're getting from constituents with the Adopta application, you can produce a useful set of map-based reports that shows condition information of assets you have, and ultimately begin to integrate that information in your work order or maintenance activity that would ultimately, resolve some of the issues that are being reported by members of your community. So there's many different opportunities to use Adopta in your community, and some of you may have adopt an asset programs in your community already. The states, and I think coming next from the Federal Highway Administration, has Adopta Road, and there's Adopta Trail programs. We'll talk a little bit about the experiences that we worked on around basins. Last week or 2 weeks ago, where I'm from in Detroit, there was a lot of torrential downpour, and there was flooding all over localized flooding all over many streets, and a lot of that flooding was attributed to catch basins that are clogged now that we're in the fall season and leaves are dropping and those inlets are clogged. So just being able to clean those out and help the citizens to do that is an important aspect of reducing localized flooding. Boston and some other communities have done Adopt a Hydrant, So after major snowfalls, citizens will go out and shovel around those hydrants so fire response personnel can quickly find them during response activities. And we've seen other programs like vacant lots that have been Adopt a Lot programs that have been implemented by land banks and other communities to help with vacant lots in the community, or even Adopta Parks to really continue to embrace the community and providing high-quality recreational opportunities. So the important message here is that you guys can really tune the Adopta application to meet specific needs in your community and have several different implementations even to support those existing programs in your community or even new programs you may want to develop with the Adopta application. So before I hand it over to Chris, let me just talk a little bit about kind of the use case we started with here, and actually give a great deal of thanks to the City of New Orleans, who also worked with us on the Adopta solution as well too. New Orleans has been a great partner, and the result of our partnership with them has been applications like, or solution offerings like Photo Survey and now Adopta. And what really struck us when we met with them is that they have about 60, maybe 61,000 catch basins in their community, and they only have the budget to clean about 3,500 catch basins on an annual basis. So there's no way, and I would guess that many of your public works organizations are very much in the same position, right, is that you've got more public assets that you're responsible for than you possibly have the funding to maintain. And so what they really wanted to do is enlist the community to do that and really participate in the maintenance of that program. And through that partnership with New Orleans, kind of those use cases around catch basin maintenance, we arrived at the Adopta solution. So what I'll do now is, with that context in mind, is turn it over to Chris, and he can just show you exactly what Adopta is and how you can configure it in your organization. Go ahead, Chris.
All right, thanks, Scott. Give me a second to share here. Everybody see my screen? Scott, look good?
Yep.
Okay. Before I jump into a demo, I just wanted to talk briefly about where you get it. So the Adopta application, we kind of house it, or we have it under a few different areas. One of them is planning and development. We have it under public works. You can also get to it through our general documentation page. If you go there, you can get to the Adopta application directly. So like Scott mentioned, there's a few different types of assets that you can use in the Adopta app, and we've actually showcased 3 of those as part of our Try It Now experience. So if you go to the Try It Now link for Adopt an Asset, what you're going to see are 3 applications: Adopta Catch Basin, Adopta Hydrant, and Adopta Park. And this not only shows you different asset types, it also shows you different geometry types you can use for the app. So there's points, polygons for parks, and you could even go as far as publishing lines for roads and things like that and use those in the application. So you're kind of not really held down to one type of geometry. You can use whatever you like. And for catch basins, I'll talk about that one for the demo today. We'll move over directly to the app, and then I'll get into some more detail about the requirements and what you're going to need to do to stand it up. So let me go over to that application. This is Adopta Catch Basin, and it's a very simple application. All you can do really is search for an address in your community. So maybe your address, maybe you want to clean a catch basin around you so you can find yourself. And then a simple login. So Scott mentioned that we're supporting email as the minimum bar of entry. So what I could do in here is type in my email address. And what's really nice is that you can use the same email address for multiple applications. So let's just say you have you have multiple programs. One of them is catch basins. One of them is street segments. One of them is for parks. You can actually have one email address, and it can access all 3 applications, or all as many as you have. So if I go to log in here, what it's going to do is search the user table, is what we call it, and I'll get into the more detail about that in a little bit. And it's going to try to find that email address. And in this case, it hasn't, because I'm a new user. And what I have the ability to do is actually sign up as part of a team. So this is an optional parameter, but what it's really asking me is, do I belong to a community group? Do I belong to an organization, like maybe I'm a Boy Scout, and there's a bunch of Boy Scouts going out to clean catch basins? And I can type my troop number in here, and it would actually associate my name, my email, with that team. And what's kind of neat about that is that you can not only go out yourself and clean a catch basin, but you can go out as a group and then report status in those catch basins. And what's also neat about this optional parameter is that as soon as I've typed in a team name, the application remembers that name. So if somebody else tries to join that group, they'll find that in the list. So it's got an autofill capability here as well. In this case, I'm not part of a team. I'm just going to sign up. And what it's going to do is tell me to go check my email. So we're not actually storing passwords or anything like that in the application. It's all working off just my email address. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK to the message. And then in a second, what I should get, hopefully here, is an email. So let me wait a little bit until that comes in. What I also wanted to mention was that you can also configure additional sign-in parameters. So if you wanted to ask for a first name or last name of somebody who's signing up, even maybe a phone number, you can do that as part of the sign-up requirements. So you can add in additional things there as well. Give me a second. Make sure this email comes in. Okay, there we go. I got an email. And if you use the Try It Live app, you'll actually get an email from ArcGIS Team Local Gov. So what you'll see is, welcome to the Adopta Catch Basin program. You're all signed up. Thanks for participating. There's 3 guidelines for the program. One of them is to remove debris from the grates, especially in the spring and fall, ensure cleaning, and then check your email. So Scott mentioned that two-way conversation. We really wanted to include that as part of the solution offering. So not only are we going to send you emails when you sign up or log in, but we're also going to send you periodic emails of when maybe weather events are coming or changes in the seasons. Like, for this one, it makes sense in spring and fall to make sure to go out there and check them. But imagine if you had subscribed to a weather service update and you wanted to send out notifications to people when weather events were coming. You can actually send out bulk emails to everybody who's adopted an asset, and they would get a unique email to log back in and make sure to update their status. So this email template we include with the offering. You can also modify it. So you'll actually see a modified version of this for the parks application or the Adopt a Hydrant. You'll see, of course, different message telling you what to do and how to participate. And then you'll have a login link. And in this case, it's going to take me back to the application, log me in, validate who I am, and actually you can set this as an optional parameter in the tool that actually signs you in, how long you want to make that available, that login, before you actually have to validate an email again. So in this case, I think we put in there a week so I can adopt assets for a week, and then I have to revalidate. So just to make sure that you are who you are and that you're validated as part of the program. So what I'll do is either select an existing catch basin on the map. So what I'm going to do is take a look at the map, and you'll see here that I have some green catch basins, which are available ones, and I have some yellow catch basins, which have already been adopted. In this case, I want to choose a available one, and I can name the asset. So maybe in this case, it's a catch basin on the northwest corner of my block. I can call that Northwest Catch Basin, and I'm going to adopt multiple catch basins, so I'm going to call it number 1, so I know kind of where that is and what it is. Asset IDs and that kind of thing are not displayed here because, citizens aren't going to typically know what that is. And then go ahead and adopt that catch basin. It's going to say thank you, and it's going to mark, if you looked on the map here, you'll see that catch basin turned blue, denoting that it belongs to me. So if I go to my username in the application, you'll see that I've adopted one catch basin, and I have the option to mark it clear of debris. Now, what's nice about this is that on a phone, I could see a big list of all my assets, and as I'm in the field even, mark the status of those assets, clean or not clean, depending on what I see. And that really makes it easy to use in the field. If I go back to my sign-in screen here, I'm going to go ahead and click on one of those catch basins, the one that I've adopted, and I can update the status of clear of debris, and I could even go as far as abandon that asset. Or I could configure the app to have multiple statuses in here as well. So if I wanted to say clear debris, maybe the catch basin is inoperable, maybe the grate on the top is broken, I could actually have that as an additional status item to report that information back to the city or county responsible to fix it. So again, very configurable on what you want to do. And if you look at the park one and you look at the hydrant one, you'll see different text here describing those different types of statuses. So that's it. That's really the application. If I were to log in again to the app, which I'll do, let me just refresh this. We'll go ahead and go back to the Catch Basin app. And let's just say I'm a returning user, so I'm going to use the application again. I've already signed up, so I don't have to do that again. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is type my email address one more time. And then I'm going to say login or sign up, and in this case it's found me, so I'm a registered user with the app, but it's still going to have me go check my email because we're not storing, again, any passwords or anything like that. I'll click OK. And what I should get here in a few seconds is a new email, and that email will include not only a login back to the app, but also a listing of all the assets that I've adopted. And we'll wait for that to come in. Might take a couple seconds. Is there any questions so far while I'm waiting for the email to come in?
No, there's
Anything
no
coming through
questions
the
so
chat,
far.
Heather?
No.
Okay. The other thing I'll mention here too, while we wait for that email, is that the text on the login screen here is all configurable as well. So if you want to give additional details about the program or what you're actually getting yourself into when you sign up, you can do that. In this case, we have some very simple text. It just says, are you a returning user or are you a first-time user, and some instructions about how to log in. So pretty straightforward there. And that's the text that you'll actually get by default when you configure the application.
There's actually one question in the chat if you're still waiting on your email.
Yeah, sure.
Can the app be set up to use Facebook, Google, or Google similar to the other crowdsourcing apps?
We actually don't have those logins available. So the only thing that we're really requiring from somebody signing into the application or signing up is email address. So we don't have that capability quite yet. If it's something that you feel strongly about and you want to include that, just drop us a line. We can figure out what the best way to get that into the application is. But really going back to that workflow and the work that we did with New Orleans, they really wanted to lower the bar for entry, and somebody just having a social media account could be a barrier. So we just have email address as the minimum requirement, and the only requirement actually for login.
Carlson had a question. So in the case of New Orleans, how would they be promoting this app to the public? Can we assume the user will be accessing the map through public access? Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and we've actually gotten that question this week. Scott and I are working with the city of Kansas City, Kansas, and without a program behind it, it's really difficult, or would be almost impossible to throw an app out there and have people use it. So the city of New Orleans hasn't quite gotten to the point of deploying it yet in production, but I would think that would be part of a larger program to get the community involved in understanding what the program is and how to participate, and kind of launching it from a main page. We've also had a discussion about kind of sharing the app out, like what's the best way to share this thing. One of the nice things about Web App Builder is that it has a share widget. So let's just say that you know about the program, but maybe next door neighbor doesn't. You could actually configure a share widget in here and share the application out to them. So there's some ideas there. Scott, do you have any other ideas about maybe how we could?
No.
How somebody
well,
could
yeah. I mean,
promote the app?
obviously, the branding on a destination on your site is definitely important. I think talk maybe for a minute, Chris, how Dane County was doing it with their pilot launch program. That may be some interesting insight.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so one of our early adopters is Dane County. I don't know if they're on the line, but the Dane County actually helped the city of Middleton configure the application for adopting street segments. And as part of that, the city wanted to have a pilot program, so they actually engaged the community directly and said, hey, we're thinking about this as a larger program. You know, can we get a group to volunteer to help, pilot the program, but also use the application and give us feedback? So they actually went out directly to the community and asked them, like, do you want to participate? Use this application to sign up, and we'll see how it goes. So that's one way to do it, direct engagement with the community and get a pilot out there, or, maybe engage the community groups directly and talk with them and to see, what would be the best way to get it out and used. We even talked this week about adopting a safe school route. So imagine if you had, children walking to a bus stop or just getting to school walking, figuring out where those routes are and then having a pilot program to make sure that when people walk along that route, things are clean and there's no, of course, dangerous things along that route that could be reported. So I think there's a few different ways to do it.
Matt has another question, and I'm not sure if you're going to cover it or not, but where are the email addresses of the users stored? Is that a related table off of the asset in a geodatabase?
Yeah, so I'll get into that. I'll definitely get into that. We'll cover that in
Okay.
just a few moments, and then we can talk about the details and what you're going to need to do there. Yeah. So let me just, it looks like my email client's down. I'm actually connected through VPN in my hotel. So it looks like there's some issues with the connection there, so I'm not getting it. So let me just try one more thing. Let me go out to my web client and see if I can get to it there. Just to kind of show you what the returning user's email would look like. I think it's an important thing to talk about. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so for some reason my desktop client's not working in Outlook. But you can see here I've gotten a returning email. So if I revisited the application and logged in, this is the email that I would get. And it basically says, welcome back. You can click on the link to go directly to, the application again to adopt more assets or do that kind of thing. But maybe I just want to update the status of an asset. And I can do that directly in the email. And that's something that the city of New Orleans also brought us, they challenged us with, is how can we engage citizens without them having to go to an app every time just to update the status of something. So the email that you get allows you to click here for clear of debris, much like you had in the app. And it actually sends a request to the application via URL parameter and updates the feature in the feature service. So you'll actually get a message saying, thank you for cleaning that catch basin, and you never touch the application. And the same thing goes for bulk email. So as I mentioned, one of the other things, another feature of the solution is to be able to send out bulk emails to people. That bulk email can be completely different text as what you're seeing here. It could just say, there's a weather event coming, a storm coming. Make sure to get out there and clean your catch basins. That email could actually contain all of the catch basins that you've acquired or adopted. And then you can update the status directly in the email. So that's an important capability I wanted to kind of show, and that you're not visiting a mapping application just to update status of something. You can just do it directly in your email. So there's that. Any questions on that part? If not, I'll go ahead and keep on going. I wanted to show. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say there was a question that came in, and maybe you can hit it when you go through the configuration. Is that Tom is working on configuring it now, and he's having a hard time with one aspect of it, is that when he's seen a behavior that it seems like he has to adopt the asset every time he comes into the app. So maybe there's you can kind of talk about how that works when you go through the configuration and how it knows which assets have been adopted.
Yeah, I'll try to answer the question. It might be something we have to take offline to figure out what exactly is going on, but I can try to triage it when we go through the config for sure. Yeah, so before we do that, I just wanted to show a couple other try it live applications that you can play around with. One of them is the Adopta Hydrant, which again is very similar. The emails are going to be different, but for the most part, the interaction is exactly the same. It's going to be log in, Adopta Hydrant, and the status items are slightly different. One of them is going to be, make sure that the snow is removed around the hydrant, or remove the weeds around the hydrant if it's not the winter. And then we also have Adopta Park, which is my favorite out of the three, I think. And this one uses just the park layer that's been published. And you get the name of the park, because in this case that makes sense, right? You want to know what the name of the park is, so you can expose that in the user interface. And it tells you when certain parks have been adopted and last updated. In this case, Hobson Woods Park has been last updated on September 13th, and somebody's given it the same nickname as the name of the park. And then we also are reverse geocoding the nearest address to that park. So it's actually, that's common across all three apps, and any app that you'll configure. You have the capability of turning on the reverse geocode, so you know which asset you're talking about when you see it. So there's a few different examples for that. And what I'll do now is switch back to, I guess, if is there any questions that I haven't answered so far? We can take those now if you want.
No, I think Scott has covered pretty much everything.
Okay.
Yeah, if you'd like to continue.
Right. Yeah. Sure. Thanks, Heather. Okay, so just some technical details about Adopta. Scott mentioned this, but I want to mention it one more time. The Adopta widget is something that you have to configure through ArcGIS Web App Builder. And that widget can work with other widgets using Web App Builder, like I mentioned, the share. And in the try live applications, you'll actually see that we're using the legend widget to show you what the different colors in the map mean. So if you see green, that means you can adopt it, and if it's yellow, it's already been adopted, that kind of thing. So those are included with the try live app. There's also a geoprocessing service that actually sends the emails. So you have to publish that using ArcMap, and there's some detailed instructions on that. So what that geoprocessing service actually does is, number one, stores your email address when you sign up, but it also sends the emails and handles everything else that needs to happen with the application login. Also updating status. So when you update status of something in the email, it actually sends an edit back to the feature layer, and I'll talk more about that. And then you need an asset layer. So this kind of hopefully answers the question that was already brought up, but there's an asset layer and a user table. The asset layer can be any feature layer that you want to use in the app, hydrants, catch basins, etc. And then there's a user table, and that user table is secure. So that user table actually has to sit on premises. What the application does is interact with it, but nothing else can. So that is a kind of a secure table inside an organization that houses all of the email addresses of the folks that have signed up. And that's really the only thing that's required of the app. And you can additionally store other information in that user table, like the user's first name, last name, phone number, that kind of thing. But that's really not stored in the hosted environment. It's not stored in ArcGIS Online. It's not stored even in the asset layer itself. It's all stored in a secure user table. And we'll talk about that. This is it's just an overall diagram of the workflow. So on the left-hand side of this diagram, you see the asset layer, and we provide you with a sample asset layer that you can extend. It's for catch basins, but you can easily convert that to work with hydrants or parks by changing the symbology and the text in the map. You can also bring in parks or anything else and just make sure that it fits that schema that we provide, and then everything else should work. You publish that asset layer to your portal, and then what you'll see here are a group of maps, and each one of those maps represents a different program that you want to have. So in my case, I've published catch basins, hydrants, and parks, and I have a single map representing each one of those different asset types, and those are all stored in individual maps that are used to power the app. And then there's a user table. So on the upper right, you'll see the user table, and that's interacted. The interaction's happening between the application and the user table. So whenever somebody signs in, it checks the user table to see if that person exists, and if you're logging in or if you're signing up, it will actually add a user to that table. And that user table really sits around for as long as you want it to happen. So if you want to have somebody adopt an asset and keep that asset for as long as they want, then you never have to really worry about touching that user table ever again. if you want to maybe have their subscription only for a year and they have to renew or something, you can go in and clear that out, and then somebody have to basically re-sign up to use the app. And then in the lower part of this diagram are a series of dashboards, and actually Dane County brought this question to me early on when they were configuring the application, like, how can I monitor the status of what's happening? And one of the ways they did it was a very simple dashboard that just showed the amount of assets that's been adopted, who's adopted them, and then when things were last updated. So a very simple dashboard to help you monitor the program and how it's working. The other thing that's not on this diagram that I need to add, and I'll probably do that after the presentation today, but I didn't talk about the bulk email tool. So the bulk emailer kind of sits aside from its workflow, and it allows you to basically send emails to anybody who's adopted assets. And it has a really neat capability of being able to draw on the map. So if you want to just notify certain people or certain areas within the city or county that maybe a storm is affecting more than another one, you can actually select that area and send emails just to those folks. And that's also part of the solution. So any questions on that before I continue? I am going to jump into the actual configuration panel and show you a couple things. But if there's any questions now, I'll go ahead and answer them.
There's one question about whether you need to use ArcGIS for server in order to, I guess, publish the services, or can you do it just through ArcGIS Online?
Good question. So the user table itself has to be published to ArcGIS server. The asset layer can be published to ArcGIS Online or portal. So it's kind of a hybrid environment. So you definitely have to publish a GP service, and that has to be using ArcGIS server. The user table has to be stored in ArcGIS server. The asset layer can be anywhere. There's no requirement on that. So it is a hybrid mode, and the reason being is mostly because the geoprocessing service and the user table have to be kind of secure. And so yeah, so you need both. Or all server. If you have server, you can put everything on server and not have to worry about ArcGIS Online, although you still have to configure all web map. So the asset layer has to be added to that web map in order to be used.
Okay. And kind of similar, Steve asked, could you talk about the desktop requirements for 10.1.4 as a requirement? Is it a hard requirement, or is there a temporary way until we get 10.4.1?
So right now, the official supported release is 10.4. There are some requirements for that bulk emailer tool, like I mentioned, that require 10.4. Now, if you don't want to take advantage of that capability, it will work on 10.3.
Okay.
And we're actually probably going to have to make we're probably making an update to the documentation to reflect that as well. So right now, it does say 10.4 specifically.
Okay. That's it for now.
Okay. All right, so let me jump out real quick. What I wanted to do is talk about the configuration of the actual app. So we have instructions on the geoprocessing service and copying the user table to an enterprise database. That's all included with the offering, so you can go through that. The next step would be to configure the application itself. And what you're seeing here is Web App Builder Developer Edition. So you need that in order to configure the application. And what you're seeing here is the Adopta Widget. So this is the same exact app that you saw in the Try Live environment in Web App Builder. And what I've done is gone in and configured the Adopta Widget. So as part of the documentation, you'll see some instructions there how to copy the widget code into your Web App Builder Developer Edition and then configure it. So what you're seeing here is that widget. You're also seeing the legend widget, which I mentioned before. And the reason why I add that in here is really to showcase when people come to the app and they don't really know what the symbols mean, just to kind of show them that, you know, green's available, yellow or orange color is adopted. And then the blue is when you log in, you're actually going to see that blue symbol representing the ones that you've adopted. So that one I felt was pretty important. And then the Adopta widget itself, which obviously you need. So if I go to the little pencil there to configure the Adopta widget, it's going to ask me for a few things. The first being the asset layer. And the reason why it's showing me the name of an asset layer by default is because I've already specified, let me close this out real quick, the map that I want to use. So that kind of skipped over that. It's sort of important. The first step would be to choose the web map that has the asset layer in it, and then configure the Adopta widget. So that's kind of step one. Step two is to configure the widget, and then choose the asset layer. So if by any chance you had multiple layers in that web map, it would actually show them here and make you set one of them. But in this case, there's one layer, so it's showing it there. Since the application does require a specific schema that we supply, it's going to automatically pick up on the relate field that is used to relate the asset layer to the user table. So it's automatically going to set that for you. And then if there's a nickname field in the asset layer, you'll actually see that autofilled as well. And that's an optional thing that you don't necessarily have to configure. And then you'll see the URL to the GP service. So I just actually went to the set button here, and I copied and pasted the URL to the geoprocessing service in this set function here. So that's setting the geoprocessing service, and then the login screen information. So like I mentioned before, the one that you get is fairly simple, and these are the default things that you're going to see. But you can configure this however you like, and you can change the default text and actually include additional information. Now, just keep in mind that you can optionally configure a splash screen as part of the app as well. So if you have some disclaimer info or some additional info about the program, you might want to put it there versus in the login screen and make the login screen fairly simple. And that's the pattern that you're seeing here. So keep that in mind. You don't want to maybe overburden somebody by reading a bunch of text before they just log in or sign up. And then what you're also going to see is additional sign-up fields. So like I mentioned before, if you want to put first name and last name and phone number, this is where you would actually configure that. And these fields obviously have to exist in your asset layer to begin with, or your user table to begin with. So if you have those fields, they'll show up as fields to add here, and you can go ahead and type those in. And this is checked on by default, the next thing, which is the reverse geocode of the nearest address to that asset. And you can choose to turn that on or off. I've found it useful for most of the apps that I've configured, so it's on by default, and then you can choose to turn it off. What color you want to have the asset highlighted in. So just very simple things here. And then the tolerance settings. So this is actually fairly important. So one of the requests that we had was to be able to allow users to add assets that were missing from the map. And so what this does is if it finds an asset within 10 meters by default, it will associate the adoption to that asset. Now, if it doesn't find one, the application will actually ask you, do you want to add a new asset at this location? And if you do, you'll automatically adopt it. So it has that capability. If you don't want somebody to be able to do that, just make the tolerance large here, and then people won't be able to create new assets. And then the asset symbol, you can modify this. So this is the one that you see when you log in and you've adopted assets. And you can modify that to be, in the case of the hydrants, you see the hydrant symbol instead of the catch basin symbol and that kind of thing. And you can browse to any image on your computer for that symbol. And we set it a little bit larger than the other symbols. So when you see your adopted assets are a little bit bigger, and we wanted to make sure that people knew that those are the ones that they've adopted. So that's for just the standard kind of layer and the geoprocessing service, the general settings there. The next one are the actions. So I mentioned that you can configure multiple actions as part of the app. When you adopt something, it's actually going to go in and assign your unique GUID to that asset. So we're actually using GUIDs to make sure that instead of the username, it's actually being stored as a GUID. And that gets tagged to the appropriate asset. And it's actually going to assign a GUID when you adopt something. So that's what that's doing. And I'm also setting things like the asset status. So this is a field that comes with the download. And I'm setting a value of adopted when I go and adopt something. So it's going to flag that field and put that attribute in there. And that could be anything. So keep that in mind. You're kind of have some flexibility here on what you want to be able to set when you adopt something. And I'm also setting the date to the current date. And so when you adopt something, we know when it's been adopted. For unassign, so if I do choose to have abandon an option in the app, it's going to unassign the asset from me to be available. So it's going to actually go in and clear out the GUID and set the asset status to available so that people know that now they can actually go in and adopt it if you've abandoned something. So that's pretty straightforward. And then the additional status items like clear of debris. So if you want to mark an asset clear, in the case of the catch basins, I've configured it to say clear of debris in the user interface, and it's going to actually go in and clear out the value for that, and it actually uses the URL parameter of clear. So when I go to the email and I click on clean or clear debris, it uses the URL parameter of clear. So that's pretty straightforward there, and that's just for when you update status through the email. And every time somebody says they've marked something clear of debris, as the city or county, it might be useful to know when that asset was last cleaned. And like I mentioned, any of these attributes are exposed in like operations dashboard, so you might want to say, show me all the ones that have been cleaned in the last 30 days. And you can use the last clean date to do that, and it's actually setting the date when somebody clicks that checkbox. And then the primary status, so the ones that show up, like I mentioned on your phone, like when you're in the field, you're actually going to have a big list of assets potentially that you've adopted, and you can just go down the list and mark things clear of debris, and that's the primary status that shows up on that My Asset screen, and you can update this symbol to represent, and these are ones that we came up with that kind of work across the board, and so, you know, empty checkbox and green checkbox for it's actually clean or clear debris. So that's the Actions tab, and then Messages, also fully configurable. So you'll see some default ones when you configure the app, but in this case I've made it very specific to catch basins. So when I've adopted something, it says thank you for adopting this catch basin, and instead of asset or something generic. So I've gone through here and kind of made it very specific to my workflow, and these are all configurable, so you can change them to be whatever you like, and that's kind of a nice feature too. So you have to worry about changing it in a config file or a string file as part of the app. You can just go in here and modify those. So that's really how you configure the widget. And like I mentioned before, you can also add additional widgets if you like to the app. We found it to be most useful when it's very simple, and there's only 2 widgets in the trial live ones that you see, really one for the legend, one for the widget itself that does the adoption, the Adopta widget. And that's the config panel. So are there any questions on that?
Yeah, there's one question.
Went through a lot there.
That's okay. If there's an asset that is abandoned, can we also set it to unavailable? For an example, abandoned hydrant because of a physical change in the real world?
So that's if like there was the actual hydrant itself has been capped or something. Is that kind of where it's coming from? I guess if so, like if there's an inoperable, like the catch basin one is maybe a good example. So if somebody comes across a catch basin that the grade's been broken, you can actually make sure that to add that to the app so that somebody can, you know, report on something like that. If there was an asset removed, okay.
Yeah, that's what he meant. Like the hydrant has like been removed from that location, essentially.
Yeah, if that was the case, like if you've capped one of them and that asset no longer exists, I delete the actual point from the feature service. So it's not even available at all in the app. That way nobody can adopt it and nobody can even see it on the map. So it's slightly different. If you wanted to report on like a broken one or one that's missing a cap or you know, that's been illegally turned on, you know, you can add those as things that people can report on. But if it's actually been removed as part of the infrastructure, like they're totally remove the asset altogether, I'd remove it from the map.
Okay. Another question, does the status of the action reset after a certain period of time?
Good question. So one of the things that we do is every time, so for catch basins, I'll use that example. Whenever somebody marks something as clean, it stays clean for that session. So if you were to in the attribute says it's been clear debris. Now when you see the application, you log in again, it will not say green checked as to clean. You'll see that it's never been cleaned as a user. So you can mark it again, and it sets the new date. So what you'll see in the attributes of the data is that the catch basin's been marked clean, but it's been marked clean on a specific date. And that's the only thing that the application really cares about is the date in which it was cleaned. If I go in again to the app, I'll be able to mark it clean again. It'll overwrite the date that was last cleaned on. So the only thing that really matters there is the date. And so as a user, you log in on Tuesday and you mark something clean, then you log back in on Thursday, it will appear as if you've never marked it clean. And so if you clean it again, it'll update the date that was put on before. So it kind of, every time you go there, you have the ability to mark it clean. So there is no time period in which it's clean. You actually have to click it again to mark something clean. That makes sense.
Yeah. That's all the questions for right now.
Okay.
Is there anything else that you wanted to present?
That's really all I had to cover. I'm not sure if that answered the other question that we had earlier about the application not setting attributes appropriately. So if you do have any issues with configuring the application, everything's fully supported that I showed today. So all you got to do is call support, open a ticket up. We can also connect maybe after the meetup if there's something that's just obvious that we can fix. But I'd urge everybody who has an issue just to log a ticket and we can track it that way.
Okay. Adam had a question. What about time-based reset for adoption? I think you mentioned that at the beginning of the presentation.
So yeah, I mean, I'm trying to figure out exactly what that means. So is that the time period in which something can be adopted for?
He hasn't responded. Yeah, he's in. I think he's going to respond in a second. While he's responding, Tom, Tom, who was running into the issue, just said that he's testing the Naperville demo that you're showing, and it doesn't record when he adopts the catch basin, so we can connect with him maybe after the meetup.
Yeah, we could definitely do that. Figure out what's going on there. And
okay,
Adam responded to you.
Yeah, so if somebody may adopt it, then there is inactivity for a long time, and it is still adopted. That was
okay.
his time-based question.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. So there is nothing that the application will do or set. There's nothing you can set to say that once you adopt something, it's only really active for a year. So what you're going to have to do is either have a disclaimer in the beginning, right? So we can configure a splash screen, or you can put it in the widget text itself that this program will allow you to adopt a catch basin for up to 360 days or something, and if you do not, and you have to renew. But the application does not do anything to automatically kind of unassign somebody or kick them out of the program. So what you're going to have to do is either remove them manually from the user table. You have to do something kind of on the back end to do that. There's nothing that the application will do to kind of set the expiration of how long something can be adopted for within activity. And that would be something that maybe we can enhance for a future version. I kind of like that idea of having the ability to set that.
Okay. As I understand, this must be configured in using Web App Builder Developer Edition, correct?
That is correct. That is correct, yep. So you have to use Web App Builder Developer Edition. And, for future releases, we are considering, this being maybe something that you can just configure through ArcGIS Online, but for now, it's something that you have to download Web App Builder Developer Edition for and configure it that way.
Okay, I think that is the last question.
Okay.
Scott, did you have anything to say before I wrap up?
No, I just didn't know, Chris, maybe if you wanted to talk about some of the, I know you've been talking to a few folks about future enhancements or kind of what's in the backlog for Adopta. I mean, it's important that everyone kind of see it and give us feedback for sure, but if you've got anything, maybe you just want to close with kind of future options for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I actually got some good ideas today, just about how long things can be adopted for. We also have that bulk email tool, which I didn't talk about too much here, but potentially some enhancements to that. So you'll see those come down the line. I can't really think of too many things at the moment.
And then we've been talking about additional configuration.
Minor things.
Yeah, and additional configuration options too, right? That we can show people like around safe schools and other alternatives.
Yeah, I think showing some good examples of the ways that you could use it would be really useful too. Not just the 3 that we have, but there's a bunch of other ones that would be neat to do.
Yep,
for sure. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I guess I'll wrap things up. Thanks for joining us for today's meetup. We look forward to seeing and hearing from you at our next meetup, which will be on Thursday, October 22nd, or 27th, I should say, which will be providing an overview of community or special events, maps, and apps. So until then, everybody have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.